I, like you, really enjoy the Lord's Word. And this morning, I opened my Bible to Romans. How then can they call on the one they do not yet believe in? And how can they believe in the one in whom they have not yet heard of? And how can they hear without someone first telling them of him? And so this morning, I'd love to share with you the work and the privilege of the work that I get to do through the work of Home for Good. And I'll speak to you a little bit in a minute about the other charity we've merged with this year called Safe Families. And I'm here with my colleague, Sarah, and I am Billy Joe, and I get to lead the church and community relationships team across London and the southeast of England. I live in London, and Sarah lives here in Kent and covers the work here locally. But I'm also here with a really important message this morning, because the reality of our work is this. Every 15 minutes today, a child or young person will enter the care system. Some of these children will have known the care system before, and some will be new to the care system. And through the work of Safe Families and Home for Good, we seek to do this. That together we seek for a society where no family or child feels alone, and every child has the opportunity to flourish. And we believe that the church is central to this vision. Our mission, to empower and support parents and carers to think through hosting and looking after children and young people so that they may flourish. To inspire, engage, and equip churches to wrap around care and support for those families who do step into this. And ultimately, from top down and bottom up, to influence systemic change for children and for families, and to amplify the voices of children and young people in care. We do this through a set of values, which are hope, courage with integrity, compassion, but importantly, togetherness. And I'm here to explore that with you this morning. In order for us to respond to, as a church, a child or young person coming into care every 15 minutes, that means around about 100 families a day are going to be needed to be available for our children and our young people. But sadly, that isn't the case. And I'll look at some local statistics for you in a moment. First of all, I'd like us to watch a little video around how we are created, and we have already explored this morning. We are created in His likeness.
At the start of the Bible, we are told that you and I are made in the image of God. We are created in His likeness. Which begs a few questions. Who is God? What is He like? What matters to Him? What does being made in His image mean for us? These aren't new questions. These questions have occupied minds since the days of the Old Testament. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses brings a message from God. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to walk in obedience to Him, to love Him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good? For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. God is awesome in His power. All authority belongs to Him. We choose to follow Him because He is worthy. Our mighty and awesome God uses His great power and authority to defend the vulnerable, to love the stranger, to give to those most in need. It's the lonely, marginalised, and those most at risk in society that he prioritises, so we must do the same. How we care for the most vulnerable in our community is a demonstration of how we feel about God. The image of God in us shines most brightly when we reflect his heart. As we follow the story of God's people through the Bible, we see they repeatedly fall short of their calling to justice and compassion. In Isaiah chapter 1, God states his distaste for Israel's worship. "Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. I cannot bear your worthless assemblies." He goes on to call them back to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed. Israel has substituted ritual sacrifice for true worship. God can no longer accept their offerings unless they are marked by justice, care, and compassion. Later in Isaiah, God speaks of the servant who would come, the one who would truly pursue justice. Jesus is the perfect image of God. Hebrews 1 verse 3 says, "His Son is the radiance of his glory, the very image of his substance." Through his incarnation, God came to earth. He became flesh and made his dwelling among us. But he didn't do so with great fanfare as a display of his power, but in weakness as a baby, fully human, totally dependent on his caregivers. As a child, he had to flee persecution, and it's possible that his earliest memories include displacement and hospitality in Egypt. In Jesus and through his ministry, we see God's heart in action. Jesus treated men and women equally in a society where women were considered less important. He welcomed children in a radical, loving way. He ate with people that society looked down on and treated those considered unclean with great compassion, even coming close. He challenged racism and xenophobia of his time through teaching and parables. He had no time for empty religious performance that neglects what is most important: mercy, faithfulness, and justice. His invitation was to follow him. And if our following of Jesus doesn't include a passion and a pursuit of justice for our society's most vulnerable, we might just be missing the point. Every 15 minutes in the UK, a child will come into care. Each one has already experienced trauma, loss, and instability. While in care, many will experience the uncertainty of multiple moves, each one adding further disruption. Where adoption is decided as the right plan for them, many will face a long wait for a family who can meet their needs. Black children wait longer for adoption than other children and are least likely to get adopted. Some children may leave care as a teenager or young adult without a family by their side. Care leavers make up 25% of the homeless population. To return to those age-old questions, who is God? He is Father to the fatherless. What is he like? He is awesome in his power and worthy of our worship, and he is close to the lonely, on the side of the marginalised, and defending those most at risk in society. What matters to him? He invites us to worship him beyond our religious rituals, with a pursuit of justice, with acts of compassion, with care for others. But there are other questions that still need an answer. What matters to you? What does being made in his image mean for you? And how could you live in response to his invitation?
Let's explore that question, the invitation of God. For some young people, there we go. These are the local statistics for here in Kent, that there are currently today, while we are worshipping, 1,960 children and young people in care of varying ages Some have siblings that they may not be home with. 39% of care leavers, so those in education age bracket between 16 and 21, 39% are not in education, employment, or training. And this is a low statistic for Kent, but 8% of your young people here are placed 20 miles away from home. And so that isn't just 20 miles away from the school, that's 20 miles away from wherever they need a GP, a dentist, health visitor, therapist, and sometimes 20 miles away from their own school, which means that they will have to travel those miles daily, with carers and social workers doing the very best that they can with the services that are limited. So for some young people, this could be the life cycle of what it looks like to be a child or a young person in care and to experience that journey. But this morning, I want to look at what we've been looking at this morning, hope. I want us to, yes, know the statistics for children and young people in care and the outcomes that are possible, but I also want us to look at what's probable. What is probable is that 25% will end up homeless. 52% of our male population in prison are care experienced. Some of the highest statistics in some of our social justice are those who have experienced care. And so briefly, if you'll let me, I'll introduce you once again to me. This was me at 15. It's one of the last photographs I have of me at school, and next to me is my very best friend then at the time, whose family were 2.4 children, and I was not. I was a kid from the council estate, and what people wouldn't have known at school is the terrible choices that I had around me outside of school. You see, at the age of 3, I entered the care system. I was a sibling group of 3 children. I was the oldest at 3 years old. And never in any of our placements, i.e. other homes that we need to be in, while services worked with my mum, were we ever placed together. And so when we were moved from home, I lost contact occasionally with my brother and my sister. Jump forward to Christmas last year, and this is a picture of my family. So that is me in the middle. That is my son with the Father Christmas hat on, my husband with the yellow Christmas hat on, and my daughter who is here with me today, Charlotte. And that's us at Christmas. You can't quite work it out, but in front of my daughter is our dog, Edie, who is looking at the treat rather than the camera because we can never get a photo with her and the camera. And this is what I wanted to explore, is that was the story and that was the narrative of my life then. But at the age of 20, this passage became my future parallel. I began a life that was chaotic. I began a life that I often talk about feeling worthless. Society was writing notes and education systems were saying, we predict that she will not be anything. She will not attain a degree in theology. She won't go on to run and have her own successful business for 10 years, where she left that business as an outstanding childminder, delivering education, care, and a family environment to children and young people, giving families the opportunity to have what they couldn't provide because they needed to work uptown and do long days and long hours, but their children became our family. My children, my son and my daughter, gained 38 siblings over those 10 years when we did that. But my story starts in a really strange place. My story towards wanting to know better for my life started in a prison cell. I'm an ex-offender. And that was all the outworking because people said that's where I was going. And so that's the journey I took. I found people who I thought were friends and discovered years later that they were gang members. We've got all the language now. They groomed me. They manipulated me. I wanted the 50p that they had in their hand to deliver the parcels, or then for 50 pence, it was an envelope from one house on the estate to another. And as I got into that culture and I began to feel as though I belonged more to that culture, I behaved like that culture. And so envelopes turned to parcels, turned to boxes, turned to me having to groom other young people to take the position that I wanted to move on from so that I could go further up in the gang and get better royalties, better friends, better securities, better safeties. But in order to do that, I also had to carry guns, weapons, knives, because that was the only thing I knew I could do. And so that led to a major arrest at 17 years old, and I was convicted in Maidstone Crown Court and sent to jail. I was lucky I was convicted as a young offender, not an adult by the time my conviction reached court, and so I went to Colchester Youth Offenders. And believe you me, I didn't sit in that cell and celebrate the fact that I was where I was. I was broken, I was lost, and I was sobbing. I didn't know how I was going to come out of that cell and survive on the wing, because I was 20 years old and there were 12-year-olds in there who were vying for my life. So dark. But that was because someone said that's where I would end up. When I came out of prison, skipping forward, I had the opportunity, but by the grace of God, to move from where I grew up, hundreds of miles away, and start life new again. And my life story was as blank as a piece of paper when I turned up on the Isle of Wight. I had the opportunity to rewrite the narrative. And I met a wonderful man who I didn't think was wonderful at the time. He was quite arrogant, quite up himself, walked in a room and went, "I'm here, bow at my feet." That was my husband. And I began to experience with my husband the notion that was church, because I met him and he was a Christian, but no one knew my past. And so he was offering this picture of hope, kindness, love, care, generosity, love beyond a boundary. I didn't even know what unconditional love looked like. And we began a journey. That was 24 years ago. And he is still my husband now, as we have seen. And this year we celebrate being married 20 years. It hasn't been without its dramas and its tough, rough, raw edges. I don't think any relationship is. But the one true thread through it all for the past 15 years, as I've lived a life as a Christian, is the hope, truth, and salvation of Jesus. None of what has come has been possible without him. And so, I'll introduce you to a few other family members. Down here, very special lady. This is Yvonne and Fred. Sadly, we've lost Fred during COVID. But Yvonne is Mama Bear. She is not blood family, but she is grandma. And if you cross her, my goodness, you're very strong. But my story doesn't stop there. It is still evolving, because I'm living in a season where God says, I'm the author, but I'm also the editor. He's editing parts of my narrative as I outwork this work with Home for Good and Safe Families, and have the privilege to do it. Because in 2019, I went to do something similar like this in a place that was really hard for me, It was where I grew up. How dare I as a child and young person who lived here, have the privilege to come and preach the word of Jesus to people that I may have hurt in the past? Well, in that very scared yes, I met a lady, and she's on the top corner here with my children when they were younger in 2019. And we'll call her Tara, but we discovered, as I shared, that she was the lady who took the photograph of me in the middle here when I was 3 years old, because she was my very first foster carer, a Christian. And she said to me, I used to feel so silly praying for the 28 children that have come through our house. And I stood there and I said, well, I didn't say, I was in tears, I was a mess. I was like, I am so grateful for those prayers. And so the narrative and the story and the hope that is the work of Home for Good is we want people to think through, what part can you play? That's a really big story, and it's one I struggle with. How dare I have the right that Jesus reveals to me these truths of Him in my past, in my story, where He's threading and weaving all of these different things together. But do we not have the opportunity to radically think through how, from an hour or through to lifetime, we could come alongside somebody who needs the hope that is inside of you, inside of your home, inside of your community. Each and every one of those people are, have, and do walk with us at every moment. Some of them have been here for an hour. Some of them will be with us for a lifetime. The impact of the work of Home for Good and Safe Families is growing. We want to see the church be the number one position and place where a social worker at a desk of 10 people can say, I'm ringing the church. I'm ringing Fountain Church and I'm saying to them, I want 5 individuals, couples or families to think through fostering so that we can keep our children in county. So that we've got a home that represents who they are. So that they've got a community around that family caring for them so that they can keep going when it's really hard, when it's really tough. We want Kent County Council to know that you are a resource of hope for them and our young people in care. And so through the work of Safe Families and Home for Good over the last year, we've seen 11,000 families who are connected into community. We want to see that rise here for Kent, don't we? We want to see that rise here for Kent, don't we? Yes. For Ashford. Yes. For the city whereby today, just like me, you've got children who are in care. Let's think this through together. Explore with us, Safe Families and Home for Good, what that could look like. You've got Home for Good champions in Ashford who are thinking through peer support and what that might look like so that Christian families are connected to Christian prayer, pastoral support and care, as well as the other offers from the local authority. Because we want to see more bed nights. Can you host and support children and young people with bed nights? Can we get off the ground in the next year here in Ashford a peer support group for Christian foster carers and adoptive families? I'm asking you, can we? Are we going to, Pastor? There you go, we're going to. Because we know the church has the greatest opportunity of hope to step into this. My story will continue. It isn't finished here. And I say that terrified because the revelation of the Lord to date means I'm in church leadership. I'm here speaking to you, sharing a story that was going to be a secret for the rest of my life. I've faced telling my children that I'm an ex-offender and work that out with them, not just me and my husband on our own, but our church was praying when we did it, ready to pick the kids up if they kicked off about it, because they might not like that about their mum. I'm also serving the Church of England for Rochester Diocese. If ever you needed to pray for me, please pray that I am safe there and that I am comfortable there, because the Church of England's going through some really tough stuff. But I'm there as a representative from being worthless to worthy. And I have to pray into that worthiness all the time, because it's not my worthy, it's his worthy, it's his glory, not mine. I just have the story. I've got to have the bravery to tell of his truth in my life. Each of you, as has been said this morning, have exactly the same. And how can we use that to come alongside children and young people in care? With hope, courage. I wasn't an easy teenager and I wasn't pretty in people's houses, but there were people who saw. I can name 7 people who went, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but we're going to give you the opportunity. And I had the tenacity to say, I know you think I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to prove you. I ain't going to get this wrong, but it's going to be tough. Integrity. Integrity is so important. Be who we say we are. Do what we say we're going to do. Love beyond boundaries, compassion, and togetherness. Home for Good and Safe Families can only do this through prayer and through the church. Explore with us, work with us, find out what part you can play with us. These are 3 ways that you could do that today. You could explore. Sarah, myself, Charlotte, and the wonderful Home for Good champion Judith is here. Talk to us after the service. Connect with us. We are a Christian charity. Could you think through what it might be like to give towards the charity, either as a church, individually, or one-off? But importantly, none of this is possible, and none of the story of the hope of Jesus is possible without prayer. Pray with us. Pray as we work across the entire UK to help serve the church to respond to the need for children and young people in care. Thank you. Thank you for being a church who I know in their very DNA are thinking this through. And from me to you, I look forward to what comes next, to the glory of God. Amen.